All right, welcome back to Intravenous on CJSF 90.1 FM. You just heard a song from Santa Gold, that was Girls. And up next, we've got an interview from LaTiesha Fazakas of the Fazakas Gallery in Vancouver, and she is live on the phone with us right now. LaTiesha, are you there?
Hi, yes, I am.
How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about the Fazakas Gallery's history?
Okay, well, I started off with a degree in art history and then work experience in a Northwest Coast kind of traditional native art gallery. And then about 3 years ago, I decided that I would go off on my own and create a gallery that was more evolutionary, where artists from different cultural backgrounds could interact with works that were Northwest Coast based as well, but also all contemporary. So I consider our gallery a cross-cultural gallery.
Which I think is represented by the selection of female artists you have represented in She right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you talk about what was the motivation behind She as a show concept?
Well, I've always wanted to do an all-female show. One of the things that I noticed, especially coming from a Northwest Coast background, was that it's very heavily male-based. There's very few female artists represented. And as a woman myself, that issue comes to mind for me, and I'm mindful of it. And I find it interesting. I find gender interesting, and the cultural circumstances and social circumstances in which kind of interact and create and gender, as well as the different ways in which people express their gender or think about it or investigate it. So because I was always interested in that, I always wanted to do a show. Once I had my own gallery, I was like, okay, I'm going to do my own all women's show. And in a way, actually doing the show helped me focus on searching out more female artists to add to the gallery. Because I came from a kind of a gallery world which was heavily male, I actually did not have a great deal of female artists that I was already familiar with. And so it was interesting for me, too, because I got the opportunity to foster and build more relationships with female artists doing this show. I mean, we're a relatively new gallery, so that's all part and parcel of it. But yeah, I guess that was kind of the idea. That was the genesis of it, was just simply an idea of, okay, I really want to do something that deals with gender. And after that, I started to think about, okay, so what would we want to say about this? What would be the premise of the show? And then I'm very inclined to the idea of differences and inclusivity. I really like that people have differences and have different ideas and have different input, and I also like creating a space in which that can all be inclusive rather than exclusive and rather than pocketed or segregated.
Right. Well, I mean, that was interesting in the press release that I read. It was interesting that you mentioned that some of the female artists who were in the show, it's a question as to whether they even want their gender to be a discussion point, which is something that I think about a lot when you're talking about promoting representation for female artists or musicians or what have you. So how did you approach that in approaching female artists? Because not everyone has a background in, gender studies and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that came up when I sat down with the artists and we talked about it, is a couple of them were like, well, I don't know, I don't really, I don't think of myself as a female artist. I think of myself as an artist who happens to be female, or and so we had a really good discussion about all of these ideas. And that was the first thing I said, was that, well, there cannot be a wrong answer. I'm not looking for pressing a particular view on women's production of art. I'm interested in the fact that there are lots of different views on feminism, and if somebody comes forward and says that, my point of view is that my act of feminism is that I don't want to be, I don't want to have, this overt gender discussion within my work.
Right.
And I thought, well, I think that that's interesting. I think that that's an important voice, and so I wanted to include that.
Yeah. And I noticed too that the artists who were involved, Carollyne, Trace, and Rosa, they all have very diverse cultural backgrounds too. So was that something that you were aware of while you were selecting who would participate in the show in the end, or was that haphazard?
Well, I mean, it's indicative of the gallery itself, and so it was kind of yes and no. It wasn't a particular thought process with the intention of this show. It was more an intention of the gallery was to have multicultural or artists from different cultural backgrounds, and it just happened to fit quite beautifully that it's 3 artists from 3 different cultural backgrounds with 3 different approaches with 3 different points of view, but all happened to be women, and it participating in a show that was all women. One thing that I have to say that everybody agreed upon was we really all loved the camaraderie in this show, and the artists really felt uplifted by each other, and I thought that was a really, really neat part of the experience.
Well, how did you come to meet each woman individually?
Well, Trace I've known for many years because she does work that is both discusses her 2 cultural backgrounds, which is Ukrainian and Haida. She's from the Haida Raven clan, and her husband is also a Northwest Coast Native artist who's Haida as well. And so his work is along those lines, speaks to the more kind of the history of the Northwest Coast and those kind of fundamentals. And so I've known her for about 12 years or so. And then Trace actually introduced me to Rosa, who's originally from Chile but has been here most of her life. And then another artist, actually Randy Cook, who's Kwakwaka'wakw, knew Carolyn Yardley and did some work with her a couple of years ago, and kind of showed me her work and said, I think you should call her and check her out. And I did, and I think she's brilliant. And so that's how it all kind of came to be.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's all. I believe in serendipity, and I think it was all very serendipitous.
Absolutely. Was there any aspect of each individual artist's work that spoke to you most when you first encountered it?
Well, I think actually each one of them spoke to me personally from a different part of myself, which I think is what I liked about it. Carolyn's gorilla squirrel really harkens me back to the days in which I was studying in art history, Pussy Galore and the Gorilla Girls, and that really kind of stand up for yourself 1970s, like, kind of rage against the system, and growing up watching Wonder Woman, it spoke to, yeah, exactly. It just really spoke to me. It made me feel, when I see it, I feel like female power. I feel empowered myself as a woman, and so that really spoke to me. And I also really liked the cheekiness of her celebrity being an anonymous. Mm-hmm. And then with Trace's, I think one of the things that hits home for me is, say, in her piece, Anticipating Ravens, is the idea, she does a lot of work with nests and eggs and things like that. And it seems, it reminds me of motherhood and nurturing, and as a mother myself, I feel very drawn to it in that way, that there's something, again, about the experience of motherhood that speaks to me, that I really liked. As well as, again, she has this real kind of, the sense of kind of beauty, that's the softness that kind of, I don't know, I feel like I can get in touch with my girly side, and I like it.
Absolutely, with the shoes.
And with the shoes, yes. Absolutely. That girl loves shoes.
Absolutely. Well, we've just got about 20 seconds left,
Sure.
So maybe let's do a quick moment with Rosa, and then we'll do that by way of introduction to the artist interviews.
Okay. Well, Rosa's, in particular, her extinctions and interventions after the Sabine women, that reminds me again of my days when I was studying art history, and I actually did a paper on David and the participation of women in the French Revolution. And so again, I feel like, okay, we're reinvestigating art history from a woman's point of view, and she does these beautiful landscapes, and the interruption of these beautiful landscapes by kind of this graffiti-esque objects and industrial objects, I think is really neat.
Amazing. Okay, well, so this has been LaTiesha from the Fazakas Art Gallery, where they are showing She right now from May 23rd until June 20th. And coming up next, we've got interviews with Rosa Quintana and Trace Yeomans, who are both artists showing there right now. So thank you so much, LaTiesha.
You're welcome. Thanks.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye. Great. So up next, we've got those interviews. Stay tuned to Intravenous.
Public art galleries, and at Fazakas Gallery presently. And the work I'm showing at Fazakas Gallery is part of a group show named She, and I started the work that I'm showing at the art gallery here at a UK residency last year.
So that's a very interesting name. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Santiago, Chile. I was born in Chile, and we lived through all the political troubles down there, through 2 dictatorships in Chile and Argentina. I ended up in Argentina with my family, and then we were brought up to Canada in the late 70s.
And how do you think that your roots in Chile has impacted your artistic process?
I think it makes me look at things from so many different points of view. It gives me such a huge perspective to be coming from a different culture, a different time. I call it a different lifetime because it feels like a different world. I don't think I existed until I came to Canada. I joke about that because it just seems so far away in such a different timeline, and that allows me a perspective I don't think I would have if I was born and raised in one place.
What was your motivation behind the Extinct Bird series?
I'm such a fanatical bird watcher. I thrive on, looking at birds, no matter what birds, and I just, I think I'm puzzled. I can't believe that certain birds fly from from Antarctica to the Arctic back and forth, in 1 year, and looking for food or finding food and nesting in one part of the hemisphere and flying to another to have, for food. And so I'm fascinated and just amazed at their abilities. And also through art history, I think I like researching the depiction of angels, for example, who are depicted with birds' wings. That sort of historical research really intrigues me, and I do a lot of it on my own time. But the main reason why I started looking at extinct birds was because of the times that we live in now. Animal habitat, animal extinctions, bird extinctions are all around us, or the possibility of them, and the devastation of environmental habitat and all that sort of thing. And one particular event a few years ago that happened in the oil sands or tar sands in Alberta, where I believe over 400 ducks flew into a tar sands. What do you call them? The pools that they have.
The tailing pools?
Yeah, and they all, of course, died. And I think it happens quite often, maybe not in such large numbers, but it's hard not to feel despair in a way. But one of my things that I don't allow myself to do is despair. I have to research and figure out, what it is that I could do or could change, or how I could affect something. And I started researching extinctions, past extinctions of birds, and that led me to such a humongous research on, the causes for extinctions, and all sorts of doors and windows opened, and so I'm still in the thick of it, and it just brings up such rich imagery to my mind when I do that research.
That's so interesting to me. And now, I have to think about your roots as someone that's traveled around the world to find your place, and how you talk about birds and how they interest you. Do you see yourself in the birds that you portray somewhat? I don't think so. I do see them as females, which is a funny thing to say, but I'm not sure if you know, Latin languages are, everything has a gender. Mm-hmm. So, for example, spiders to me are females, and so I think that affects maybe what I think, because I am bilingual, and my brain kind of switches back and forth at times, so I do get mixed up a little bit as to what is what in each language, but so I think that might affect, as opposed to, what my background in what actually happened in my life, kind of thing. You combine imagery from the Renaissance with birds, such as the shelduck that you were talking about. Yeah. How do extinct birds and other animals communicate divinity to you? I think there's sort of, there's all these cliche sayings like the eye in the sky, or there's all these, mythologies about birds, how they can see what we cannot see, they can fly, they're magical in many ways. And, maybe now we know so much scientifically about birds and habitat and all that sort of thing, but not very long ago we didn't. And they were really magical beings, I think, and supernatural beings. So I see them, I like to carry that imagery forth, because it is nice to think in this day and age of, oil spills and all that sort of, it's kind of, sad times in a way for the natural world these days, but I like to think of birds as magical and supernatural, as if they could, I guess, survive whatever, they can fly above it all, they represent, I guess, hope for me. Is that something you associate with femininity as well? In a way, it's like, they're such hard workers. I mean, you must be a hard worker to be able to, like a hummingbird flying from Mexico to Canada twice, back and forth, twice a year, and through any weather. And they're tough little things. They're fighters. And I like to think that females have had to be. I look at my mom, who had 4 children, and we didn't have electricity, we didn't have water, we had mud floors, things that were such happy memories for me in my childhood. But for her, it was absolute hell. But she just stuck to it, and she brought us here, and she still cooks for me, makes my favorite meals and brings them over when I'm swamped in the studio or whatever. So, I like to think that in that way, I do relate females to birds, which is a funny thing, because there is a kind of like a cliche saying, comparing birds to women, but maybe it has something to do with how hard they work. I'm not sure. So can you talk a little bit about the motivation behind incorporating graffiti into your landscape paintings? Yes, I love graffiti. I love the style, the genre, how it's in the streets, how it belongs to no one and everybody at the same time. It's a very, very political, very free space,
free thinking. Like, it just opens up all kinds of possibilities without having to please anybody, really. It's the opposite of pleasing somebody, which is what people have to do when you want to sell your work. So in that way, I find it so just freeing. And I like what the style does, which is creates three-dimensionality out of a two-dimensional plane. And that's challenging. And to me, it's really invigorating and challenging. So I do like the design aspect in that respect.
So this weekend is the opening of the She Gallery. How did you come to be involved in such a project?
I was asked to be part of the three-person show back in December or November, I think. And it was one of the artists who's showing, Trace Yeomans, bought my work, or her husband, Donnie Yeomans, bought a few of my paintings via The Crawl, which is a big, cultural show, open studio show in Vancouver in November every year. My work was sold to them, and the gallery director or owner went to their house and saw my work and asked me to be in the show. So it was very, very, very opportunistic, very lucky for me.
Do you think that gender expression has informed your work?
I think it can't help but to do so. I don't think I do things consciously necessarily. I do work on intuition. Intellect does come in after, in the studio or through process, but yes, I do. I think it's part of it. I don't think we can help that. It's part of who we are.
Is there any particular anecdotes or stories you can think of where that was extremely clear?
I think so. I think it's sometimes I think it can work for you or against you. I don't think it does either necessarily. So it depends on the situation, but I think a lot of times I am connected to my background, be it them from a poor country with political upheavals that we've escaped from, and the fact that I'm a female, that my future would have been very different had I stayed or lived on in South America as opposed to come to Canada. So I think it has, in those ways, just generally speaking, nothing in particular.
And in the gallery, they talk a lot about female artists in general. Do you have any female artists that inspire you or that you look to want to emulate?
I think there's so many good artists out there, and I don't necessarily, there's so many more male artists out there that are showcased on a daily basis that it's hard not to come up with male names to begin with, because that's what's forefront. But, if Eva Hess, who was a sculptor, I think in the 50s, 40s, she died very young, but, people like that, and Rachel White-Reed, and British artists who have really worked through a process. So, yes, there are quite a few. And, of course, Frida Kahlo, but Frida Kahlo has been overused so much. So I have a hard time mentioning her, even though she struggled and she did what she did, no matter what anybody said or thought. So for those reasons, I think I have mentioned her. Yeah.
So given the fact that it's predominantly male artists that are being showcased, how important do you think projects like the She Gallery are for women artists?
I think it's important. I think it makes, it gives people an opportunity for a certain reason that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And the more opportunities there is, the better it is for whoever it is, I don't think it's everything. I think it is a great opportunity to showcase a point of view, and that's great.
Do you have any suggestions or tips for female artists that want to, that are trying to break into the scene, or, that want to have their paintings seen or shown?
Well, there's a quote by Norman Jewison that I live by, and that there's 5 things you need to be a successful artist. Maybe, actor, musician, or visual artist, 5 of them, and the top one, the absolute most important one, is perseverance. The least important one is talent, and I think that everyone's talented, but it really comes down to perseverance. The other 3 are, who luck, and timing. Then perseverance is the most important. So just persevere at what you do and be honest and genuine. Not necessarily unique, because I don't think there's such a thing, but honest and genuine. And you'll get wherever you need to get to.
Well, personally, I think that incorporating angels into paintings about birds is a very unique thing to do. So I would credit you with some unique qualities for sure.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for talking with us. We encourage everyone to go and check out this gallery. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
My name is Trace Yeomans, and I am an artist who actually work with many mediums, but mainly oil painting or fabric art, but using my Haida designs and my Ukrainian heritage.
You are currently showing work for the She exhibition. How did you come to mix your Ukrainian heritage and your Haida heritage in your art?
Well, I grew up with Haida art in my life. So my grandfather was an argillite carver, and my grandmother was a seamstress. And she taught me to sew button blankets when I was 10. So that part of it came from that part of my life. And I studied art throughout high school and after, mainly oil painting. During the mid-'80s, I started sewing Haida designs onto dance regalia and wall hangings. Many of those pieces are in museums around the world, so it's been a long time that I've been doing art. And 3 years ago, I just started combining both cultures, Haida and Ukrainian, with a fabric show that I did using Haida designs and bright Ukrainian colors. And more recently started to mix my oil paintings with carved Haida designs. So you'll see both of those in this next show, fabric art and carved oil paintings.
Have you found yourself more connected to one culture over the other throughout your life, or has there been a balance?
Well, when I was growing up, I lived in a village where I looked more white than native. There was a bit of bullying back then, so I never felt like I belonged on either side of my cultures. Felt kind of separate and made me feel divided in a way. So painting about both of my cultures has brought them back together for me. So yes, there is some balance now. I've always kind of used my Haida art in my art. Right from the early 80s, I've been doing that and using it on dance regalia. So, and comes from, my family background. It's just always been connected to me, and it just seemed natural to just start using it. It was a way to speak about how I felt about growing up with, especially the Haida art in my life. It was just a way of expressing, for me to express my views on my Haida heritage and my Ukrainian heritage.
There was one series in particular that stuck out to me when I was looking through, the Raven in Shoes series, and I wondered if that series was a representation of yourself putting on different costumes at different times in your life. And I wondered if there was one set of shoes that you most identify with right now.
Yes, definitely a representation of myself. I'm a bit of a shoe addict, so I love shoes, so it was natural to use those in that. And I've even got a shoe room built for my shoe addiction. But the Ravens in Shoes was an attempt to add humor into my work. And yes, they do show, they wear the shoes of different aspects in my life to show different sides of what I do and stuff, and things that I enjoy. I don't think I identify with anyone in particular, but I guess if I did, it would be the one in the red shoes. I'm not afraid to stand out, and that one's the one that seems to stand out to everyone, Raven in red shoes.
It's an interesting mixture of culture for sure. There's a lot of imagery there. What is your connection to the imagery of the Raven?
I've used the Raven to represent myself throughout a lot of my pieces. especially the white raven. In my Haida heritage, the raven is my crest, so it seemed natural to use it to identify myself. Sometimes I'll combine a realistically painted bird with Haida-style design to show that it's half white and half native, as I am. Sometimes I'll use an egg throughout some of the pieces as well. The egg is to show that I'm a little different. For example, the nest painted with raven eggs, and one has a Ukrainian design, while the other ones look like regular raven eggs. And this was to show that we're all ravens in the same nest, but one looks different, where I'm still a raven.
Can you talk about the connection between imagery of the egg in Haida culture as well as imagery of the egg in Ukrainian culture? Because that seems like a theme in your work.
Well, I think that the egg, for most people, if you look at an egg, it represents fertility, or being born and stuff. So the egg is used in the Haida culture a lot as well. Salmon eggs or raven eggs or whatever, the eggs that they use in that. And it was a way to bring my Ukrainian side together with my Haida side, something that people can identify without knowing about either culture, anything about either culture. They can recognize the egg, and they recognize that the Ukrainian egg is the brightly painted one, and the Haida style design inside of an egg. I've used in all of those. I've actually put myself. It's a little raven, my raven crest, in all of my eggs that are shown, and some of them I've painted with the Ukrainian pattern in them. So it was just it was mostly just so that people can identify without even knowing what either of the cultures was about. And it helped me bring those two together.
That's beautiful. How did you become involved with the She exhibition?
Well, LaTiesha, I've known her for many years. I've worked with her before. I've done a show with her. And when she approached me to do an all-women show, naturally I was excited about it. I mean, it was a chance to show my work again, right? And alongside of two amazing female artists, one of which I know, Rosa, Quintana, and she's I have a bit of her work as well in my home. So I was excited to do it with them, and the concept of the show was important because I think there's just not enough women artists out there, and I think it's our time to shine.
Mm-hmm. Well, how has your gender expression informed your work? How has being a woman become part of your work?
Well, let me see. As a woman, everything is seen through that lens, I believe. So that's how you see the world, right? I paint about things happening or have happened in my life. And some of those things come from being, that only a woman would understand, like motherhood, birth, and stuff like that. But I don't think it's something that I set out to, when I sit down to paint, I just paint. I'm not doing it from a woman's point of view. I mean, intentionally. Some of that stuff just comes out because that's just what I am. I'm an artist first, and I just want to paint art, right? Whatever comes to me or whatever is interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. How do you think your gender experience has affected your experience as an artist, sharing your work? Have you found that there are any barriers to you because you're a woman, or did you not notice that based on being a woman? So far I haven't really noticed too much of it. I've had a really positive experience. I've had 3 shows in the last 3 years, and every one of them has been really, really good. So, so far I haven't, it's been really fortunate. I haven't really experienced anything that's limited me as a woman, not the fact that I'm a woman. I think it's been fairly positive right now, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on the types of stuff that I've been painting that are actually very feminine aspects coming out in my work these days. So
I'm just looking at the image of the white raven in the high-heeled red shoes.
Oh yeah.
And I'm wondering, does the white raven have anything to do with age as well? Because I know that some white birds tend to represent older birds as well.
No, not in that case. The white raven is just a rare bird, that albino raven, right?
Okay.
And the reason I started using it was because I am Haida. I grew up in a village, and I looking more white. I identified with this white raven that was up there for many years. That it got picked on by the black ravens, and they eventually killed it. I mean, this is sort of a sad story, but and I kind of felt for it in a way, because I kind of understood how it felt. Even though it was a raven, it was the same. It lived there with them. They didn't accept it, and that's kind of how I felt growing up. So that's where it all started for me, as I started painting myself as the white raven, and coming through it, not in a way that I wanted to portray a negative aspect in my life. It was more about me overcoming that and being okay with being who I am, and creating a place for myself in there, and bringing together the two cultures, which I'm very proud of, both sides, not just one. And even though the Haida side was more dominant in art, in the art world, with having my family background that way, with Haida art growing up. But I wanted to also show that I was very proud of my other side, my Ukrainian side, the white side. And so my goal with all of my work is to try and combine the two successfully, so that they portray a whole instead of two separate cultures.
Has that been a trend, that your Haida art has gotten more attention than things that combine the two?
Well, it's new that I've just been combining them in the last few years. So, and I'm, getting that out there, even though I've done, so my Haida art has gotten more attention, because that's what I was doing. I did dance regalia in the 80s, and button blankets and stuff. And, it was, successful. They got a lot of attention, but so it's yet to see, I guess, how this comes out. Hopefully people will understand and like what I'm doing. So all I can do is just paint what I love, and hope that somebody else loves it.
Can you talk about the nest process?
The empty nest?
Yeah, the physical. It's more sculptural.
Well, with that one, it was a life-changing event in my life, to do with my last child, my son, leaving home and leaving me with an empty nest. And the idea came from just how we as women, mothers end up kind of with the kids leaving home, and the things that we have to deal with, and the things we think about after they're gone. And so all of the twigs and stuff represent all of the hopes and worries and anxieties of worrying about your children when they've left. And so it's very symbolic of what was happening at the time when my son did leave home and left us with our empty nest. And it was a very deep, meaningful piece. And I did a bronze sculpture of the same idea, where I collected twigs and cast them in bronze and put together a nest. And so it's again an empty nest, which most people, I think, parents can identify with when their kids leave home.
And now you've done some art in collaboration with your husband, isn't that right?
That's right.
And can you talk about some of the projects you've undertaken together?
Well, he does a lot of sculptural and totem poles and stuff like that. So throughout the years with him, his carving stuff, I was always a designated painter and did a lot of the painting on totems. big pieces that he's done. But also my dance regalia in the 80s was him designing and me putting his designs on until I learned how to design. Some of the stuff that I do now is just my own designing, but back when I first started, he was my designer. So we collaborated his designs with my sewing skills, and that's how it began. And so I paint with him, and I've done projects with him as well that were up in the Vancouver airport. Project was me painting a giant 6-foot moon mask. Well, it was one of my oil paintings, a replica of his original mask, but they couldn't use wood that big. It was 6 feet in diameter, so they had to figure out a way to make it look three-dimensional from really far away, so they hired me on as an oil painter to make a three-dimensional image to represent one of his masks. So I got an interesting project with that one.
Awesome. There's a lot of combination of identities in your work, and it's really exciting to see. So congratulations on the show opening up this weekend.
Oh, thank you.
And thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you later, Trace.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.